We turn to this now. Deputy Public Works and Infrastructure Minister Sihle Zikalala went on a site inspection of the construction of the Soshanguve Magistrates Court in Tshwane today. It's part of the department's plans to address the issues that are stalling some of the construction projects in the province and I suppose elsewhere. The Deputy Minister joins us now for more on that conversation. Minister, good to have you and thank you very much for your time tonight. The department, let me say, has been engaged on this widespread oversight visit to the various projects, be it in KZN, be it in Limpopo, yourself, you've been to the courts and other places. Is this a periodic thing that you do? Are you embarking on a particular audit of the project? Is this something that you're introducing the new minister to, I suppose, the scope of work that the department is currently engaged in?
No, thanks. The program we started in the previous administration, and it is continuing. This is Operation Zikalala, where we have identified all stalled projects. We've enlisted them and ensure that we develop intervention plan for each and every project. So Soshanguve Magistrates Court belongs to those projects that are delayed, and we're trying our best to ensure that they are expedited. As far as I can remember, the court was supposed to be completed last year. It wasn't completed. And if projects are delayed, that leads to escalation of prices and cost in general. Yeah. And therefore, we need to ensure that we implement our projects on time and within budget. Yeah. More so because our client department ought to use those facilities to provide services to the people.
What is the value? Do you have a value of delayed projects now in total that you think should have been finished by now and they are not? And what does that represent in terms of value for the department?
Well, we may not specify the amount, but we've identified the top 50 projects that are delayed. These include number of magistrate courts and regional courts. It includes police stations. It includes projects belonging to Home Affairs. And therefore, we are working to ensure that those projects are implemented with speed. We recover the time lost and ensure that we hand them over for services to be provided to people.
Let's zoom in at this a little bit on the Soshanguve one. We'll touch on the others in a moment. On paper, the work would have started in 2018, but in earnest, the building started happening around 2019, disturbed by lockdown. You would have then come back to that project around 2021. And as you put it, the previous deputy minister would have reported in July 2023 that the process is quite at an advanced stage. By December 2023, that building would have been occupied. What happened?
Well, at that time, we were intervening in a specific project problem that involved the contractor as well as the professional teams, which are consultants that were employed, such as architect, engineering services. So we had to eventually terminate some of those, and as public works, we insource and do those services ourselves. Hence, we are now convinced that the next 6 months will be sufficient for us to complete this project.
So you would have lost 7 professionals. How significant are these? I know one of the issues that would have caused major delay is the quantity surveyor. You seem to have a new one now that you believe will be able to pull you through in 6 months. But what other professional skills did you lose or expertise?
Well, there are a number of skills, but in particular, it's a quantity surveyor, the architect who started the project from the start, and he then left. And we took those services into the department, and we are continuing to provide those professional services. We are, of course, concerned, and that's why we have taken a decision that as the department, we must continue to build the internal capacity of the department to deliver on the project that we are executing on behalf of the government as a whole.
It's now projected to 424.5 million, according to Treasury's projections. You speak of 300 million. What's the disconnect there?
Well, that will be the escalation caused by the delay in particular. And you will remember that the delays caused by COVID-19 was a bit long, and therefore it led to cost escalation. And that's why we are where we are. But we assess each and every project that we are undertaking and ensure that we put in place framework which will talk to ensuring that the financial investment goes with the project progress and development.
Yeah. You were reporting of 150 EPWP jobs that would have created around this, but I heard you earlier on saying that one of the things that you discovered this time around was the lack of community involvement to assess things like that, whether there is direct benefit that this project is having for the local community, transparency of opportunities, and so on and so forth. What would you have wanted to see happen as far as opportunities that are created here, job-wise, business-wise, etc.?
Well, it is important that when we implement projects, communities are integrated and they participate so that they will have ownership of the project. But in this case, we should have ensured that we localize, especially in terms of opening more opportunities, not just for few, but more opportunities for SMMEs. We should have ensured that more job opportunities are created. Hence, we have put in place the structures that include all stakeholders involved now to ensure that they work together as a collective and no one is left behind.
Right. Now, you've, of course, mentioned the 50 projects that have been delayed, but there are other interventions, of course, that you are also looking at, which is part of this oversight work that you're doing. Let's touch on, for example, this issue of Home Affairs leasing at 300 million rands and so on and so forth. Is this something that is new? Is it something that you would have discovered during your tenure as minister? And what have you done about that?
Well, there are a number of leases that we have identified and we have ensured that we intervened. Some we intervened because we subjected them to investigations, including the SIU, and the SIU established that some of the contracts were irregular or were too exorbitant. Some of the intervention were about ensuring that we lower cost through negotiation so that we don't spend a lot on leasing buildings. But that's why we have said, let us review the whole strategy. Instead of leasing properties from the private sector, we're now emphasizing that let us embark on renovation of our own buildings so that departments don't go to lease, but they use our own properties as the Department of Public Works.
So 214 buildings from private owners. I mean, would that have been necessary? What would have necessitated that?
Well, we must firstly allow that at some point, as government, there was a point where officials or the department as a whole dropped the ball and only saw the private sector as the only route to provide office space and office accommodation. And that from us, it's wrong. We have said from the sixth administration, which is the previous administration, we must relook this issue. We developed the asset optimization strategy, which talked to ensuring that we utilize government-owned buildings so that we stop this ballooning lease account.
And what is the process that is being followed now, for example, to assess those contracts? Another one being the Telcom Towers complex, which is in Tshwane. That also currently facing some kind of investigation. 695 million is what could have been paid for that building to be purchased, 250 million to provide some renovations. What informed that? I know it was before your time, it was in 2016, but when you came in, what did you see there?
Well, firstly, what is it that we are doing on the first part of your question? We have what is called the Rude report. That report is an assessment of the space payment. How much do in the private sector people pay per square meter? So we are now saying, let us use that as a determinant for office accommodation. We must not have discrepancies where it is government that leases a property, we pay high price, but if it is private to private, they pay lower. So we are using that as a standard measure. Secondly, as I said, we are changing the whole strategy. Rather than depending on lease, we are emphasizing the route of renovating our own buildings. But with the issue of Telcom Towers, it's not a building that is owned by private sector. It is owned by the state. What has gone wrong is that there have been huge investment, but the work done does not amount to what we have invested. That's why, as the then minister, on the 6th of April, I said this matter must go for a full forensic investigation so that those who were involved should be held accountable.
You have a challenge, and I know you're saying, yes, there was a little bit of delay in the Soshanguve matter that could be attributed to what you call so-called construction mafias. The minister has a different term. He really believes there are construction mafias. Maybe you'll sit down around the table and decide what actually is the way out. But is that a real challenge? Because what needs to happen first is to identify the problem and say, we have a construction mafia that's operating in the country, and then come up with a solution of how you want to tackle it. But it doesn't help if at one end it's a construction mafia, it's a business forum, it's a community that wants to be involved in the project. How exactly are we approaching this?
We are saying as the department, the issue of the construction mafia must be dealt with, but we must deal with it holistically. One, if there are people who are genuine, they are involved in business forums, they want to get access, those people must be enrolled and be trained and be given opportunities following the legal framework that is there in government. So that's how we say we must deal with the issues of local entrepreneurs, the SMMEs who want to participate. And that must be done following due processes that are known as part of procurement in government. And we are discouraging big companies to come with their own subcontractors when they do work in local communities. But instead, they must employ local contractors. So that must be clear. But we must deal with those who are extorting money from contractors, who are disrupting sites. We must deal with that as a criminal act. And that criminal act is tantamount to collusion that is often seen done by big companies. All of those criminal behaviors must be dealt with and isolated from the industry. We must ensure that the construction industry is properly regulated. That's why we've even said the tendency of big companies of employing foreign nationals who are not here in the country legally is one of the challenges that must be addressed.
You've had, of course, benefits of both ends. One as Premier in KwaZulu-Natal, also a little bit as Minister of Public Works, in how these conflicts happen, right? Do you see your current strategy, I suppose the tough love type of approach that the Minister is taking, going to work in that context?
Well, we must be tough. We must be straight and firm to deal with criminal elements. And that has worked in a number of cases, including in KZN. And we must continue with that approach. But we must also be mindful of the skewed economic patterns that still persist in the country. And therefore, economic transformation must not be a lip service, but must be seen in a practical way. And that's why we are saying we must move with speed on the implementation of the Public Procurement Act, which have been enacted by the President. Ensure that they are set aside, ensure that there is clear localization framework so that SMMEs will benefit.
Are you not concerned that you are going to find a situation where the President is pushing ahead with the investment of infrastructure? He's already mentioned that in his opening address, wants to turn the whole country into a construction site. But you have not held this dialogue with the forums, with the business entities, with the communities on to say, folks, this is how we should behave, when these projects come.
We have started the engagement. You would have seen us even before elections engaging with these forums and local communities here in Gauteng as well as KwaZulu-Natal. So these processes started and we are going to continue with it. It is because of that we have established the social facilitation unit that is ensuring that wherever we have catalytic projects, we intervene timelessly, train local communities and the SMMEs, ensure that they are ready to participate in those projects, but ensure local ownership of projects. And then in that way, we'll be able to isolate criminals who want to extort money, get bribery, and we must deal with those elements without any compromise.
The Langa police station, what's the work that's being done there? How far are you? Is one of the police stations that would have been cited as problematic.
Inanda police station.
Langa, in Cape Town.
Langa police station,
yes,
it is one of those, and it is one of those that we are prioritizing as part of our top 50 to ensure that they are completed on time.
Right. Now, Minister, Deputy Minister, if we are to look back a little bit at the conversations we've had, especially with infrastructure that would have been damaged by natural disasters, it's been argued that our building techniques are such that they don't rebuild these infrastructure in a manner that is more resilient to the changing weather patterns. What technologies are you employing now as you approach this massive infrastructure build investment?
We're saying let us build back better and in a resilient way. And that resilient way take into cognizance the green buildings, where we'll be able to ensure that the buildings we build do conserve electricity, water, and amenable to proper waste management system. But we are saying in terms of our structural mechanisms, we must ensure that each and every building, the engineering work that is done is proper and talk to the future, takes into cognizance the current situation, but also talk to the future due to the inclement weather that often affect number of provinces in the Republic.
What is the conversation with the other arm of government, local government? There's this thing of conditional grants that are not being spent, particularly when it comes to infrastructure. Of course, you are national and there's provincial and separation of powers. But there have been suggestions to say there needs to be a more seamless approach into how infrastructure is built. And if capacity for planning, advanced planning, future planning sits at national, national should be able to have that conditional grant ring-fenced, but be able, at least in some way, to direct it and monitor that it is spent for the projects that it is supposed to be spent for. It's a complicated thing, but is there an attempt at least to begin to move in that direction?
Of course, it's complicated, but there are efforts to address this matter. The first is to use the district development model to bring on board expert teams. Expert teams would come from national, provincial, and assist our districts in terms of capacity, because in number of districts and metros, there is a scarce skills when it comes to the built environment. And therefore, this shared service of expert teams seek to complement the capacity at local level. But secondly, we are saying we must be firm on the issue of infrastructure maintenance. And we says through COCTA and the treasurer, we must ring-fence the budget that is meant for infrastructure maintenance. Thirdly, in case where municipalities, it is clear that municipalities are failing, departments, even if it's the national departments, they must take over and implement projects on themselves. We have seen that, especially when it comes to water and sanitation. We've seen the department intervening and implementing projects on its own.
And finally, the issue of hijacked buildings. You know, for example, when we had the situation with the building here in the city of Johannesburg, the Sindiso building, it emerged at some point that it was unknown really who owns this building. Others saying, no, it's owned by government. Others saying, no, it's not owned by the state, it's private owners. And of course, some kind of investigation ensued there. One, have you assessed your asset register? Are you confident of how many buildings are owned by the state at all spheres of government? And those that have been hijacked, how are you reclaiming them?
We have put in place Operation Breakback, where we are reconfiscating hijacked buildings, those that are either illegally occupied and some were stolen. Even those that were stolen during the era of transition. So Operation Bring Back seek to ensure that we consolidate the asset register and further claim back the buildings that are in wrong hands. We have expert teams which involve a number of lawyers and town planners. And we have those who are expecting and going to ensure that they look on each and every building. And if it is government building, it must be registered in our asset register. And there are those buildings that are totally dilapidated. Some of them are not even owned by the state, would be owned by the private sector. We're saying municipalities must be given the right to expropriate those buildings, either demolish them so that there is safety of communities living around those areas.
Khuzeni, let's appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on this evening. Deputy Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure there, Sihle Zikalala.